Welcome, everybody. So Ariel, we have already heard from and been introduced to. For those of you that are just showing up, she's the co-founder of Interaxon, maker of the Muse headband meditation technology. Robin is CEO of Andromeda Entertainment and the lead developer of Sound Self, which is one of my favorite psychedelic VR technologies in the space. He's focused on using video games as a tool for the transformation of consciousness. Thanks, Robin. Sara, over here on the end. Sara Huskies combines her neuroscience research into psychedelics and VR with her love for movement and martial arts to hack the brain-body connection. She is CEO of Radix Motion, building Mew. Did I say that right? An embodied messenger platform that lets us send hugs and dances to each other. Thank you, Sara, for being here. Right over here, second in line, is Dr. Bashar Bhadram. He's an assistant professor of psychiatry at the Medical University of South Carolina. He's an expert in development of novel brain stimulation techniques such as TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation, non-invasive vagus nerve stimulation, and focused ultrasound, and runs the Brain Stimulation Lab at MUSC, where he develops non-invasive neuromodulation techniques to treat neuropsychiatric disorders like depression and stroke. He's also the co-founder of Bodhi Neurotech, a startup company that emerged from his lab, which is developing a neuromodulation platform for e-meditation, electronic meditation. And last but not least, Dr. Mendel Kaelen. He holds a master's in neuroscience from the University of Groningen, and did I say that right? And is now a Ph.D. candidate. No, so you finished. Okay, I thought so. I got an outdated bio. And congratulations, Mendel now has his Ph.D. Good, and I put the doctor up there, so I'm obviously confused. So got his Ph.D. from Imperial College London. His research interest lies in studying the role of music in psychedelic therapy from a neuroscience perspective. For his work, he uses neuroimaging data from healthy volunteers administered with LSD, as well as from an ongoing clinical trial with psilocybin to treat major depression. He's research fellow at the Beckley Foundation and board member of the Open Foundation, and is now one of the founders of Wavepaths, which is a company that is bringing together music, psychedelics, neuroscience, and technology to focus on how music can have the same kind of impact on us as psychedelics in terms of transforming human consciousness and experience. Is that a good description? Am I hired?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. So I want to dive right in, and I want to start with Ariel, and I'd love to hear your question.
So my question is, how can we use the knowledge, the technologies, the experience in this room to help heal the social divide in America today? So when we look at what's going on in our country, I don't need to point out the social divide that we're experiencing. And when we look at ways that we can bring people together and try to heal the schisms, the social schisms, the racial schisms, the class schisms, the belief schisms, in order to bring people to a common goal and a common good for all, there has to be things that we can do. We're smart people in this room with amazing technologies. There's a great study that came out of Yale that showed that when you take people with conservative values and you bring them through a visualization exercise in which they visualize themselves being completely safe, they then answer a follow-up questionnaire as if they have more liberal values. So the act of allowing someone to feel safe actually switches not just your behaviors and your feelings, but your core fundamental values. So with that in mind, how can we use the knowledge, technologies, and experience in this room to help heal the social divide in America today?
Thank you, Ariel. Bashar.
So my question is, are these technologies shortcuts? And so I'll start how I usually start. Most of my talks go, here's a list of all the forms of neuromodulation. And always on the list is meditation. And when I walk off the stage, people ask, well, what did you mean by that? And so what I mean by that is you can actually take expert meditators and put them into an fMRI scanner and look at what goes on in the brain when they're in a meditative state. And you can do that the same with novices. Some would argue I'm a novice. You could put me in the scanner and look at how my brain responds to what I perceive as a meditative state, and they look totally different. And so we can use technology to actually measure what the brain looks like in these meditative states. And now we have the technology, a lot of them are different forms of energy, like magnetic stimulation, or in the case of our recent new product, electrical stimulation, to perturb the neural networks in novices to induce a brain state that looks like an expert. And then you can measure whether the physiological response and the experiential response is something that sounds or feels similar to that of an expert. And that's what we've been developing in the lab, what we've been translating into the company, and really leads to this question that I get asked all the time, and I want to ask you guys. Technology like this, where we can simulate the brain into a meditative state, perhaps some of the tech that Mikey's developing where we can create group flow dynamics that rapidly accelerate and enhance meditative practice, are these technologies shortcuts?
Beautiful. Thank you, Bashar. Mendel?
So when you asked me to reflect on this question that is really burning for me and keeps me awake at night, I thought I could go in two directions. One is a question that makes me really excited and inspired. Another is a question that maybe concerns me or keeps me awake in that state, in that sense. And I choose to go for the latter. And it's not a question that I have an answer for particularly, but I think it's a question that is important to address. And the question is in relationship to transformative technologies, where I would define a transformative technology as a technology that is so powerful that it has the potential to change the very fabric of ourselves and our society. What are the potential risks when we introduce a technology like that in our current cultural, economical constructs, and how may we mitigate that? And maybe to provide a bit of context to that question, I can share a few personal anecdotes in relationship to that. My very first own psychedelic experience was very meaningful. The second time, I introduced it to a close friend of mine, and we bought mushrooms. They were still legal in Holland, so we had fresh mushrooms. And we ate 3 times the recommended dose. And it was literally a mountain of fresh mushrooms that we were eating, and we were still getting high, already getting high while we were eating it. Why? Because we saw potential in there, and we wanted to go deeper. That experience almost killed me, and I'm not exaggerating, and it's the only experience that I would honestly call a bad trip in the real meaning of the word, because I put myself and the life of my friend at risk. I ended up living in the Amazon when I was 20 years old, and in search for ayahuasca and for healing, if you wish. And what I found there, in addition to all the beautiful things, was one of the most creative melting pots of esoteric ideas and alien conspiracy theories. Not really a healthy climate to have these experiences in. Returning to Holland, it took me actually a long time to find my grounding back as well. On the flip side of that, when I became a neuroscientist studying the therapeutic use of psychedelics, I meet more and more psychiatrists who do not dare to even touch these drugs themselves because they're afraid of them. And these are the same individuals that will be sitting with patients who have their very first experience, having an incredibly profound experience themselves. And the list goes on. There's a lot more anecdotes that I can share that give context to that question. We have powerful tools at our disposal, but how can we create a society together that integrates this? Like electricity, the mastery of fire, also examples of transformative technologies, very dangerous, but I think we're all happy that we found a way to integrate them. How can we do that with psychedelics and other transformative technologies?
Thank you, Mendel. So just to say your question, is it, so what risks do transformative technology present when introduced in our current economical and cultural constructs, and how may these risks be mitigated? Robin.
Thanks, Mikey. So I'm an artist and have been an artist for years. These days, my craft is more focused on business and contracts and economic systems. When I first started making my work of art, Sound Self, a virtual reality technodelic, sometime before I had my first awakening experience through LSD at Burning Man. I'm sure a lot of people here can understand what that's like. And it left in me the seeds for a moment of inspiration that months later, and it's not like I was hacking at this problem, how do I use video games to wake people up? It just appeared in my head as like a blueprint of my first oneness experience. So I've been working on that project for a good long time. If you come to our party tonight, you might get a chance to experience it. I have what might be an uncommon opinion here, which is that I think that the really most powerful place for these transformative technologies to emerge from is not from science, although that's an important tool, and is not from looking at the business, is not even from therapy. It's from the moment of inspiration that artists experience, that we can't understand necessarily, that we can't, but it comes through. I think anybody who was at East Forest's concert this morning can understand that, the power of something like that. You can't crack that code by thinking about it. So these days, I'm focused with Andromeda on connecting these artist-created transformative experiences to the emerging markets of therapists and so on. These are technodelics. And my question is, with the full power of channeled wisdom that comes in that moment of inspiration, aided by the wisdom of science and everything that we're learning and all of modern technology, will technodelics eventually, or even not so eventually, pass or surpass psychedelics in their efficacy?
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Hi.
Sarah.
So I'd first like to ask, who here has heard of the predictive coding, sometimes called predictive processing, or Bayesian brain theories? Raise of hand. Just good start. If there's one offering I would like to offer the crowd here is look into these theories. They offer a very amazing insight into how our brain works, and if we're trying to hack it or change it and create different types of synergies in ourselves with our environments and with others, it's a great framework to start from. Part of this framework looks at what it takes to be a self-entity, right? There's so many parts, like you were talking about. In our brain, there's such complexity in our body. And this theory claims that what creates a oneness in us is simply statistical correlation. So if you've heard of this rubber hand experiment, right? If I put a rubber hand in front of you and touch it, at the same time as I'm touching you, your brain actually starts to change and believe this rubber hand is part of you. Researchers take a big hammer, smash it, and really see the physiological response. So it's very deep and very powerful. Part of what turns us, again, the sensory inputs that are very important to what we are is this body, right? Is the sense of proprioception, where our body parts are in space. And this isn't just important for creation of ourself, it's also very important for creation of the connection between us. We have networks in our brain that are constantly monitoring body movement, my movement, your movement, body language. There's a lot of research that really claims that the basis of empathy is just physical mimicry. If you look at children and how they learn from their parents and all these attachment theories, you really see how mimicry is really, really important to how we learn as humans and how we connect to each other. Now, when it comes to technology and we're connecting through these cell phones and our fingertips, there's a really big problem. It's not a lot of our body. It's not there. And that's basically my question to you. What can we do to actually bring this type of nonverbal embodied connection to technology? And I'd like you to do a little experiment together. I'll show it like a part of it now. So can people just pick their hands up in front of their head? And we're gonna try to sense a little bit about this like embodied connection that we can get. And I'm just gonna lead my hand up and down and you're just gonna try to follow. Awesome. So this was very fun for me. And I want you to try to do this in pairs or in groups. One person leads, then the other person leads, And then the third time, no one leads. You just put your hands in front of each other and try to see if you can synchronize. This is an experiment that's created by Lior Noy and his team in Weizmann Institute. And I'd like you to report back how this felt. Did you feel this sensation? And how we can bring the sensation into technology.
Cool. So if for those groups that choose Sarah's prompt, part of what you do will be starting with that experiment.
Yeah.
And we can actually do a quick reminder of how that experiment works again in a second. So thank you, Sarah. So what we're going to do really quick is we're just going to, do you all, can you see your question? Do you want, so we're going to just say your question one more time.
How can the knowledge, experience, and stuff in this room help us heal the divide in North America today?
Thank you.
Are these technologies shortcuts?
What risks do transformative technologies present to us, and how can these risks be mitigated?
Will technodelics surpass psychedelics?
How can technology support this embodied nonverbal connection we have?
Beautiful. Thank you. Applause for our amazing people and framings and these questions. So now it's your turn. So the way this is going to work is you are going to turn around. You're going to find 3 people, ideally 3 people you don't know, and we're going to take 15 minutes. You're going to come to a consensus. It's part of your bonding process on one of these questions. You're going to choose one, and then one person's going to be the note taker, and you're going to condense your 15 minutes of conversation into notes. If you need any pens, raise your hand. All of these folks on stage are going to be roaming around the audience. Feel free to pull them into your conversation. So who would like to go first? Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Oh, and let us know your name and then whose question your group responded to.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Adorable.
Hi.
I know, it's adorable.
Yes, you are.
So, thank you. So we were fascinated actually about combining, are these technology shortcuts with the first question because they feel so relatable. And within that, if we think about awakened future, right, and the people in this room, a huge fascination that our group had was around who is building these technologies, and the idea that the technology is reflective of the people that are making the technology, right? And so if we have this purpose of stepping into awakened futures, just like everything that we're seeing in the social constructs around our economy, around education, around all these gaps that we're finding, if the folks that are developing the technology don't reflect at large the communities that we're wanting to serve, then we're going to continually perpetuate these gaps, these huge gaps. And so are these technologies shortcuts? There is this suspicion that they have been and they will continue to be unless we define who we in this room are and what we look like and how to create seats at the table for people to bring more diversity into these spaces, to have these deeper conversations about how we can awaken not just everyone in this room, but people, not including me, but mostly people in this room that don't look like us. So within that, there's a question around how can we solve our healing crisis, and how can we deeply unpack patriarchy? You know, yesterday's conversation was about psychedelics, and I was curious about the connection with this idea that a lot of people are fine with puking in a bucket, but have a really hard time talking about race and diversity and inclusion. And if we're thinking about spirituality 2.0 and Awakened Futures 2.0 and technology 2.0, we need to be willing to have these conversations, to have people in the room to bring voice to this, because we can't have a bunch of white dudes talking about the problems of social conflict without having people who look like them be at the table to solve their own problems. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. That was the case where a monologue is so welcomed and so needed. Thank you very much. Please, who would like to respond?
Amen. I think it's a pretty great response. That was an extremely good point that you made. You know, when we talk about both the creation and the dissemination of these technologies, often they're still reaching just a very, very few people. And as a result, only make change and don't represent everybody. You know, they only make change in a small world. So thank you very much for bringing the point, and I would love to hear any solutions that anybody has as we go for how we bridge this social question of how do we bring more people to the table in the creation of this tech.
Thank you. Any other response?
You brought up the point, a great point, I think, is who is creating these technologies. And in the case of academic laboratories where we really strive to do the best science, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials that test these ideas, it's really our peers, right? So we have peer review. And I think it's really important that the technologies that are put out there go through this process, that it's not just a bunch of vaporware that's popping up on Kickstarter, right? It's these technologies that are proven effective, shown to have an effect, and have run through peer review that are then published academically and then disseminated as a normal paper would. And then you can go ahead and use the technology at home. I think that's the most important thing to ensure safety, to ensure efficacy, and ensure these things are really intellectually honest. So that, I think that's a great point.
Thank you for your question and inquiry. I don't have, obviously, an answer. I have a little story from my life and questions that follow that, and this is vulnerable as fuck to share. Well, you woo now. I used to be, so the independent game world is so, which I was a part of for a decade, beautiful, beautiful community. And one of the really admirable things about that community is how concerned with equality and inclusivity it is, such that it's had a really radical change on the industry. I just want to get I'm going to assume most people here aren't gamers. I'm a gamer. I go to conventions like PAX all the time, and I've seen a transformation in that industry from going from a place that's really for white guys, young white guys, to being, there's still a lot of those narratives that appeal to that demographic, but more and more inclusivity and more concern for inclusivity in the culture as a whole. That's not the vulnerable part. That's just where I come from. When I was, as a member of that community, also deeply, deeply concerned with these things. I was once part of a little reality TV thing. I'm sorry, this is really long, but I'm going somewhere with this. These are the stories I have to tell to make me feel safe in sharing the part that I want to share. I'll just skip to it. About a year and a half or so ago, I had a lot of radical changes in my personality that resulted from the death of a family member. A lot of shedding. And one of the things that shed for me was my preoccupation with equality and my preoccupation with inclusivity. And I found in my own life, and I recognize my privilege on this stage saying these things, but I found in my own life that by letting go of those concerns, and I don't know why, but suddenly I became a lot more powerful and a lot more effective, and my ideas came to fruition a lot more easily, and I was making the connections that I wanted to make so much more effectively, and this dream that I have, which is bringing awakening technologies to more people and helping these technologies evolve and move, came to life in a way, and that there was almost a way that for me, my relationship with equality and inclusivity was holding me back. And so I don't have an answer here at all. I wonder how to integrate these things. I wonder, that's all I have to say. I wish I had more here. Please.
I just want to say thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing that, because I know a lot of people in this room are probably in a place of having similar insecurities around that issue. Mm-hmm. And there's this African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, go alone. Mm-hmm. if you want to go far, go together. And that the very thing that we are trying to heal right now needs to be done with people that don't look like us in the room. And that if we make these shortcuts and we feel this invigoration and this energy, and it doesn't include people that look like me, then we're gonna keep looking for something in places that we're never gonna find it. We need to be together in order to really heal this. And so I feel you, and I invite you to lean into that discomfort so that we can actually do this together.
Thank you.
And I want to just quickly speak to it as the event organizer as well. We put on an event which was kind of the precursor to this event about 4 or 5 months ago, and it was an evening event on psychedelics, technology, and meditation, and it was 3 white dudes on the stage talking about psychedelics, technology, and meditation, and a wonderful woman who I hadn't met yet, Liana, who's sitting here in the front, stood up and asked some really important and pointed questions around how are we working to bring different perspectives into that conversation. And it so clearly struck me that we needed help with that we actually brought Liana onto the planning committee for the conference, partly with that mission in mind. And we've been putting a very conscious effort into that, and we've still failed. And so it's difficult. And so I just want to say that I know we could do better, and it's been there in the space from the beginning. And so if you want to pull any of us aside, organizers from the conference, and you have ideas on how we could do a better job, please know that that's something that we care about, and we're open to hearing about that. Cool. Next.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Ivana, and we were answering Sarah's question about how the technology can support overall connection, not only nonverbal connection, because we start from connecting with each other, and then we kind of embody it into ourselves, and then we share it with others. And thanks to an amazing group, I think we came with a few ideas that I would like to share. So the first idea is like technology helping to fill the blind spots. Sometimes we're in conversation with other, and the person is saying, "Oh, I feel so great. I'm in such a great mood, and everything is perfect," while the facial expression says that, everything is terrible. I'm dying. And that's the first thing, that sometimes if there is some technology that helps us to fill these blind spots, and I know that with mindfulness practice, with meditation, we're actually able to see what really the person feels, not what he says. It would be somehow helpful. So that's the first idea. The second idea is actually about improvement of the event. You can use it. I give you the tip for the next event.
Thank you.
Maybe we can come out with a technology that, imagine we all enter the room and we start to breathe in the same pace, how synchronized we will be, and how connected we might be in this realm. So synchronicity is something that's already proven in a breath work. When you do the session and you put your hand in somebody's heart and you start to breathe in the same pace, and you feel like all your cells of your body merge with other person. So imagine we enter the room and we start to be breathing in the same pace, and it would be really, really great. So that's the second idea, and the third one I think is brilliant idea, just genius. It's the idea about now we know where our friends are, and we can we can see the connection and where they are, basically in the area, so we can follow them. But imagine you get the data of how the people feel. So you get the message that, okay, my wife is a lack of oxytocin today, and she's really looking forward to 10 hugs and maybe making love tonight. So you come home and you're like, darling, I'm here. I know you need that. And that's also how now the technology can help us to come out with nonverbal connection. So, and we're more connected. We know what the person feels, and yeah, that's the idea. Thank you, my team.
Thank you. I love those ideas. Maybe in that spirit, we can take a deep breath together. Inhaling, and then a big sigh on the exhale. Any response to those ideas, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I love all of them. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to this type of extremely vulnerable and impactful data, right? How can we do this in ways that the users themselves have control over their data, and before, if somebody's going to recognize my facial expression before I do, it can even be somewhat scary or a loss of agency. But I still love that idea as a type of sort of feedback mechanism of, it's very hard. There's so many parts that we don't always know what's going on with ourselves. Parts of me might even think I'm happy, but other parts are actually being repressed because of that. So to use this type of technology to help me recognize what's going on in myself and foster this more honest connection, I think is very powerful. As well as the last suggestion of having more of a, what is my emotional state? Because this is also something that I'm trying to build with Miu. We're creating these filters. So you come in there and you're like, what's going on in me? And you can choose this, like, I'm explosive today, or I'm peaceful today. And you get a different avatar with different music, and this whole thing reacts to your movements. And you can sort of send that as a fragment of yourself to someone that can really receive it and even like be with you and send back whatever you're needing. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Who's next? Right here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bharat. I'm from Australia. I've flown all the way here for this conference, and
welcome.
It's been so amazing. And before I share our team's points, I just first want to acknowledge, though we are talking about, the differences and bringing equality and bringing, people from different thing into this whole topic, I just want to acknowledge that you guys are the forefront of creating this, right? Like, thinking about the conversations we have back in Australia, like, you guys are at the forefront to even come together and have this conversation. So I first want to acknowledge all of you for being here and having this conversation. It's just so amazing to witness.
Thank you.
So we picked the last question, like, what are the risks in transformative technologies? The first point was, we talked about the same point again, the creator bias. We gave it a name. So the creator all being, from a small demographic, white men, so how can we include people from different demographics into the conversation? And the way to mitigate that risk was to, again, like, involve more people. And one of the ideas could be like creating a specific role or a title where this person is just focused on that aspect. For example, like, I want to acknowledge Adorable for all her amazing insight. Can she be part of the community and offer some of your ideas and wisdom and bring that in? So how that person in the panel who's just focused on bringing diversity and bringing the ideas and wisdom of different culture and different so that's our first point. The second one was about weaponization, like, how can this technology be used deliberately for wrong reasons? People redesigning it for wrong reasons, like Bashar's technology of just, you can study the brain of a expert meditator, and then you can replicate that into a novice meditator. Like, think about terrorists using it to like create a brain of anger and hatred in someone who's not. So how are you going to avoid that? What is the mitigation? We didn't answer that. We talked about, like, the pricing accessibility. So when profit being the main, if profit is the main driver, for example, right? When I go to India, right? I was born in India. I've been in Australia for the last 10 years. What we think is cheap here, let's say $10 a month to use Spotify, it's not cheap back there. 500 rupees a month is very expensive. So technology is not accessible to everyone equally. So can these businesses think about pricing models based on the income of the demographic, based on the income and the buying power of the community? So it's actually cheaper in India, it's cheaper in Africa, whereas it's different pricing for America. And I think that makes it more accessible for everyone. And then we said, but that pricing, extreme affordability, doesn't mean ads. We don't want to make it free by selling the data for advertisements, right? And we were wondering what will happen if people like Muse sold their data to advertisers. It's like really sensitive data. Imagine someone's brain information being sold to companies. People just become so much vulnerable. You can pretty much manipulate anyone for anything, if you know how their brain works, right? So the security of the data now becomes just so much more important than ever before. This is just such sensitive private data, and that's a huge risk if you don't keep the data super secure.
Pick your favorite last point.
Last point? No, I think that's it.
Awesome.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And we finally had one question, with the panel, what are you guys doing in terms of those things, keeping the data secure, avoiding hack, wrong people using it for wrong reasons. Thank you.
My favorite topic. I am obsessed with brain data privacy. When I was making Muse, it was the thing that would leave me at night ruminating, how do we make sure that this doesn't go wrong? And so I created something called Sara, the Center for Responsible Brainwave Technologies, that actually seeks to create a set of standards for the entire industry, talking about how brain data is used, the claims that you make with this technology, et cetera. And rule number 1 is you always own your own data. You can rescind it at any time. The data is yours, end of question. This data can never be sold, it can never be monetized, it can never be used in ways that are going to reduce your agency. So pillar number 2 of Sara is that this technology can never be used to reduce your human agency. Sell you shit that you don't need based on your brain data, zap things into your brain, have governmental oversight, et cetera. None of those are acceptable use cases. So we need to just continue to advocate for these policies, ensure that everybody who comes into the ecosystem continues to act in ways that are good players and really keep questioning. So extremely good point.
Yeah, I think Muse is doing a really awesome job with that. They're really on the forefront, right? They're collecting brain data from all these people, but it's yours, and they're not selling it, and that's important. Now, if someone does that in the future, I don't know if a rogue agency or country can do that, but perhaps they may, and if so, we need to have safeguards against that. 2 points I want to hit on briefly. One, the affordability and accessibility of this technology. I've always had this vision that all of these technologies one day will be free, right? We would open source everything and allow individuals to have access to it in India or in third world countries. I did an interview about 5 years ago when we were developing a non-invasive VNS device for depression. And the goal of that project was to avoid the cost of medication and deploy these cheap tools to treat neuropsychiatric disorders in third world countries. So that's my passion. I think it should be free. That's my stance. But currently, you need to generate some revenue to create a product to then sell. So I think long-term vision, these things should be free. Short-term, they need to be as cost-effective as possible. And then about zap, I get that question all the time. Can you zap someone into a state where they become some sort of antisocial being that's used to create harm? I don't think that technology currently exists. Will it one day? Perhaps. I know that it's important to think about, and it's a great sci-fi idea, but that kind of problem is really difficult and takes a lot of expensive technology and time. So I don't mean to table that, but I don't think that technologies that are currently invented, at least publicly known about, can do something like that. That would be my opinion on that.
Yeah, just to further that, the amount that you can currently do with consumer-grade brain data is pretty limited. You know, we're obsessive about making sure that it is safe, but really can't do much with it one way or the other.
Yeah, there's not enough data points, right? To even, you couldn't record someone's brain data and then say that Ariel had coffee, 2 cups of coffee this morning. You know, it's really tough to do, but it's really provocative, right?
But we're getting there, and I think that's the big question, right, that you want to be prepared for. I'm not going to repeat everything you both said because I really echo it, and I think it's an incredibly important question. With Wavepaths, we are thinking about this a lot. Do we even maybe not need to know who you are as a user? Not only can your data stay there, but can you be completely anonymous? And it's also really an invitation for everyone to constantly hold the companies accountable and have conversations with them all the time. Because there will be companies, and there are companies that are looking into this domain. The internet was invented with this big hope for freedom online, but very soon it became one huge mega machine for marketing and advertisement industries. And there are companies looking really deeply into neuromarketing, for example, and they are in essence interested in how to measure, assess subconscious signals to tailor more effective advertisements to you. And I agree, the EEG is not giving a lot of kind of detailed information, but if you combine different modalities, if you combine EEG with microphone on your phone, your location, your Google Calendar access, and so forth and so on, you can actually do a lot and get quite far in understanding what an individual is, who an individual is, and how you can influence that individual. When it comes to technology and snapping people into a certain state, I mean, lobotomy is quite effective. Of course, that's not being used anymore, but I think we can, I'm actually not aware of this, but there's something like technological lobotomy, I guess, with TMS. I'm not really aware of the literature.
You can do high-intensity focused ultrasound to lesion a subthalamic nucleus to remove tremors from people that are debilitated with essential tremor.
So you could probably induce asocial states with inducing temporary hypofrontality, I suspect.
Yeah, but you need an MRI scanner in your garage, and I don't think anyone has that. Yeah.
Right. But this, if I may add one more point to this, I think it's a really important question because we will get there at some point, that we are able to snap people into certain states or induce emotions quite powerfully. And I think this also boils down to your question, what are the shortcuts and what are the downsides of arriving at a certain state if we bypass the process to get there, right? And I think there is, in my view, a danger with looking at the destination and forgetting the process that you need to undergo to get there. It is, in a way, trying to summon a plant without the roots, especially when it comes to personal development. There is this aspect of agency and ownership that is essential if we are talking about real personal development. So I think there may be a real danger in these technologies to create an illusion of enlightenment or an illusion of being free of suffering or an illusion of being healed. And the consequence of that will be not very helpful.
Sarah?
Yeah, so part of, this is a very good question. Thank you, especially the last one, what can we be doing? And what we're trying to do is engage our users. Educated users will not keep, we're one of the good guys. We come from a Zilla program. It's really important for us to conserve our users' data. But if we educate users about how impactful this data is, if we educate users about how this technology can impact them, they are now much more able to keep their own safeguard and pressure other companies to do this. So we've created videos like This Is Your Brain on VR. We've created chat rooms inside of VR Chat, the social VR platform that explains what VR does to the brain. Basically trying to get users to understand how impactful this technology is. And then, if they want to go and play zombie shooter games 10 hours a day, okay, they can. But I would really like them to know how this can affect their brain long term. So that's sort of what we're trying to do.
Cool, thanks, Sarah. Is it super important?
It's relevant to the question, and it's a different attitude. Just directly answering your question about privacy. what we do, and I think what the arts really lend themselves to doing is just keeping it local. Adam Ghazali spoke the other day about closed loop systems. If you use the data right away and like keep it programmatic, there's no need to put it on the network or anything, and it's intrinsically safe that way.
Cool. Thanks, Robin. Awesome. Who's next? And so just one reminder in terms of keeping the flow. Pick your one or two top points, because I know you all talked a lot for 15 minutes and you have probably 100 awesome things to say, but to be able to move through and allow a lot of people to speak, pick like the couple things that are really the most burning things from your group. Yes. Sorry.
Okay, great. Hello, my
Hello.
name is Andy.
Hi, Andy.
And I had a lovely little group here. And first, the two of us, we felt like we had an answer for all the questions. And then our partner came over and she really wanted to talk about the shortcuts. And we were, one thing that she brought up was, are shortcuts bad? And the truth is, no, man, I'm grateful for my phone, so I know how to get to the freeway. Now I have to stop and talk to somebody. But I like the fact that a map still exists. I think that with these companies, when you're integrating different cultures of people, knowing that you're gonna have a shortcut, because hey, we all went and did mushrooms together. Now we all know that we're one and we can all connect, but then leaving this space for the shortcuts to fail. Getting rid of the word failure and knowing, like Bruce Lee said, there are two ways that human beings grow on this planet. Kensho, Satori. Kensho, learning through pain. Failure, breakups, right? The world is gonna hand you Kensho, that's volcanoes. But then there's Satori. That's when you grow through enlightenment. That's when you come to a place like this and you connect with somebody who gets what you're saying. And then you look around and you're like, hey, I know that you're me and we're all one and we're all just an artistic extension of this universe. So if you are your art, whatever you're creating is an extension of your art. When it has flaws and if you're mad at it, you're mad at something about yourself, right? So we were sort of circling around this, like, yeah, we all did psychedelics. I opened up my heart, and now it's about leaving that heart as open as possible. Even today, I was like, I'm wearing white. I'm gonna wear green, because I know that colors have a it's like integrating get your crystals and your technology together, but ultimately, what we keep coming back to is story and art. And the way that you guys are educating each other and connecting, and the way Adorable got up here and told her adorable point of view, right? We need her stories. We need everybody's stories, but we need to share the Satori stories. We need to tell people, hey, loving yourself is easy. You don't have to go and, barf up all your mommy issues. You absolutely can do that, but you can also meditate. That everything, like the Native Americans say, everything can be medicine. So if we're all on the same page from there, then I'm curious, what are y'all's hopeful, positive futures? Because we keep talking about the Ken Show. We keep talking about there's gonna be Ken Show, but like Bruce Lee says, you don't have to attack. You see it coming and you meet it like water and you hug the problem. And you love the problem because only hurt people, only hurt people make hurt and painful technologies. So if you're making technology, but you look in the mirror and there's something you don't like, you're gonna hurt the world with your technology. So go share your stories. It's kind of, that's where we're at. Art though, is the important part.
All right, wow. That was art right there. What are your hopeful scenarios?
I think I shared mine earlier. The hopeful scenario being that we all drop our shit, recognize that we're just other human beings and we aren't afraid of one another and we make the world a better place together. And that's what it is for me.
Yeah, my hopeful future is really that you will be like a person with a bow and arrow, but that quiver is really all of these different tools that we create. Some of them are technological, some of them are medicines, some of them are our own individual practice, and you can use them whenever you need them. And sometimes you need a long arrow and sometimes you need a short one. And I think if we can take that approach, we can really create an ecosystem of integrated technologies in medicine and even talk therapy that can change the entire world.
I think I'm going to play a bit of a devil's advocate here. I think peak experiences are overrated. Just as a reference, in our work with psychedelic therapy, the biggest changes we saw in patients who were going through difficult experiences where they were able to relate to their emotional pain in such a way that that pain got understood, acknowledged, and then transformed into what you may call a peak experience. Again, I think if we try to chase the peak experiences, we may actually lose the capacity for us to grow in such a way that we fulfill our actuality, we actualize our potential in a sustainable way. So I think with that context in mind, my hope is that someone talked about emotional awareness and emotional insight, that we find a way to not only admire peak experiences, but admire the whole spectrum of our emotional being that we are as human beings, and learn how to connect with ourselves authentically in such a way that we understand ourselves, can connect honestly with others, and build sustainable, meaningful connections with the society at large and our community that we are part of.
I just find it so, if I look where I am right now and touch into what's happening here, and this is the result of, zoom out and see the millions upon millions upon millions of years of evolution, the billions, that this moment is happening, that it's so easy for me to be an optimist. And from my life personally, I know everywhere that I look that I see a problem, and I know this in my heart now, everywhere I look that I see a problem, I know that the solution is in the problem. And I know that I think it's so important to be grateful for our problems. Because in gratitude for our problems, the way forward just shines ahead. And it is our problems that show us, that teach us and show us what to do. So I just like looking at the world that way, and that helps. Yeah, that's what I got.
I think for me, the biggest hope would be understanding that a lot of our needs come from this body, and rejecting the shame, the oppression that's been put on our bodies throughout the generations, especially women, and this whole patriarchy. I come from Jerusalem, so I grew up with not being allowed to show my elbows, right, because they're too sexy. And you laugh, but it's not fun, right? And even though here we're a lot more empowered and we're open about it, it's still a big challenge. How can we talk about our needs for sexual connections, our need for touch, and bring these type of solutions to our needs in an honest way with technology and with whatever means we have? So that would be my hope, that we can sort of bridge that gap.
Thank you, Sarah. Who's got the mic? Yes.
So, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate the role you're playing in our society and in this movement. Yeah, that's right. So the question we decided to answer was Dr. Kaelen's question, and basically there's a lot going on. With that. There's a lot that needs to happen. Education is the biggest paramount. Education of the clinicians and education of the patients. You can't really shove the education down the clinicians' throats. And one problem is that they haven't all taken the medicine that they're serving. That's kind of an issue, because if they haven't gone there and come back, they can't speak. They can't really comfort the patients into a deep sense of trust and knowing in the medicine. So one proposal would be that there is a third party that people go to, like a third party consultant that people go to, and they say, this is what I'm suffering from, these are my problems, I've studied a little bit of this and that, but they can educate the patients, connect them with the proper clinics, and they also have integration resources. They can kind of see people through their experience. If the ketamine doesn't work, they can connect them with the MDMA therapist, psilocybin, etc. And and yeah, they can kind of be plugged into this community. They can follow up with people and understand who's having good experiences at what clinics and what practices are they using, and just go through basic education. One of the other issues is that people understand that psychedelics can help with anxiety, depression, PTSD, but they don't really understand how. There's not really a map of that. And that is something that we are on the precipice of forming a map of exactly how psychedelics are helping and what they're really doing in the brain. But there's also a lot of harm can be done. So like in the case of and this is my last point, in the case of 5-MeO-DMT, some people can have experiences that are so deep that they haunt their dreams. And it's actually a sort of anti-trauma. It's such a deep, impactful experience that it's similar to PTSD. It's something that's so impactful that it can haunt their dreams. They call it night school, or they call it flashbacks. And it's often pleasant, and it's sometimes very unpleasant. But a lot of that has to do with the dose. So if you have too high of a dose, the experience might haunt your dreams in a positive or negative way, depending on your state, depending on the facilitator. So these are things that people need to know about, and these are things that the clinicians might not know about. And that's where I believe a third-party consultant could come in and kind of hold this space for someone's full healing experience.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any thoughts?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think that's really good to be reminded of the importance of education and also be patient in that process. I very often still in interviews I'm asked this question, but aren't psychedelics dangerous? Aren't they addictive? And rather than laughing that question away, it's an opportunity to explain what psychedelics are about and what the data is showing us, and that in fact psychedelics in the right context could be used to treat addiction in this case, right? I also would like to add to what you just said. The challenge that we're facing is that mental health care has, when it comes to treatment efficacy, not improved for around 7 decades, right? The medication has become more, or not more effective. Some of the symptoms, the side effects have become less strong, but the efficacy is still the same as 7 decades ago. ECT is still one of the most powerful treatments for depression in this case. So now we have a paradigm here that shows something very different. People receive the drug once or twice, and they respond acutely, and improvement can sustain for a long period of time. And it hints to a very different paradigm of therapy. And then we look at the model, it's not pharmacotherapy, it's not psychotherapy, it's something radically different. But it has great promise. And then the question is, of course, how do you educate psychiatrists, who are right now the only people allowed to provide these medications, these medicines to people in the right way? And I think that is a process that demands a lot of patience and understanding as well. And that, in combination with the desire to make this treatment available very quickly, right, with psychedelic therapy becoming really a global phenomenon at this moment, that is a very, very tough question, a tough challenge. How do you train a psychedelic therapist? What qualities, what training does that imply? Right? Normally, if you are a psychotherapist, you don't just do a training to become a psychotherapist. It's a path. You undergo psychotherapy, you have years of training, and then you return to psychotherapy at different periods in your life. And the same for being a yoga teacher. You know, you not just do a training and start to give yoga lessons, you're constantly engaged with that yourself as well. So I think something along those lines may be a solution for psychedelic therapists in the future. But then the question is, can we integrate that in such a way that patients are not at risk? And then sometimes I'm asking myself this question, should maybe the patients be the teacher here? Right? Should we acknowledge the experience a bit more rather than only the data points in our scientific papers? I'd love to see an academic journal just focusing on case studies, for example.
Thanks, Mendel. Okay. Your turn.
so excited. Thank
Finally.
you.
Been waiting.
My name is Z, and our group was started out off talking about Sarah's question and the experience of a grandmother's virtual hug versus a lover's virtual hug, and how do we experience those so differently? Perhaps it has something to do with the holistic experience of presence that can't be broken down into the analytical factors, and yet there's a host of neurobiological elements and cognitive elements like our mental models and the psychological, archetypal, so many different features of that have to be built and developed over time in order for us to have a physiological response to a virtual stimulus. And so those things being internal, it's like there's internal technology that has to be developed. And so we were wondering if technology could actually bring us together to practice being together better. That the tools themselves that we've been developing and innovating and exploring with may require an extensive ecosystem to bring us out to nature, bring us together, give us rich, diverse, intergenerational, intercultural, interpolitical kinds of hands-on experience that, from birth, we start co-regulating with people around us. If we don't experience ups and downs of emotions and different kinds of dynamics and ways, then it's almost like we're just only in the middle level of frequency, the middle bandwidth, and in order to really use some of the technologies that we're building now, we may need a face-to-face training program in embodiment in order to support those elements so that we're not just going again and again in the same bandwidth, but we're actually expanding our range of human embodiment as a means to deepening that presence and designing more technology from that place of embodied wisdom. So I guess that's our question to you is, whatever technology it is that you're excited about, whatever psychedelics it is that you're excited about, how can you be a part of building the matrix to deepen the embodied experience so that it's not just that peak experience or that closed loop system that's deepening a certain particular pathway, but that we're using the power of these tools to deepen presence in a way that lives inside of us. It's the universally accessible technology because we're building the tech inside.
Beautiful, thank you. Beautifully said.
I've got one.
Okay.
Go for it, Ariel.
Oh, okay. First of all, I just want to honor and acknowledge all the amazing speakers in the audience. I kind of don't want to say anything because I want to make time to hear from everybody else. Such beautiful wisdom. Super quickly, extremely good point. And I think when we think about creating technologies for transformation, we so often think about the technology that has to be devoid of the human, but often these are just technologies that support the human. The human in the loop is important. So maybe we don't even need to get to the second step that you're proposing, which is, first you create the environment so that then technology can do something cool. But technology has a role just in creating the environment, bringing people together, and that is sufficient. That is the technological solution that allows for human connection.
We have to, as technologists, who here in the room is working on technology, is a technologist, all right, a whole bunch of us, we have to stop just engaging with the mind. We have to stop making data-driven, data-oriented technologies that interface with the mind. And the thing that gets in the way of that, of course, is that our interfaces, be it a phone or a computer, are designed to touch you through your fingers, which is an extension of your sense of mind and agency. They're not designed, our interfaces are not designed to touch your heart or your body. So the whole interfaces of technology that we are used to working with bias us towards only engaging with the mind of the user. So in spite of that, we just have to start meeting the user on the level of their body, on the level of their heart, on the level of their soul. And there's just no other way.
Very briefly, I'd like to touch on this, the intergenerational and the grandmother's hug, because a lot of what's sort of leading me in my development is I want to have that hug, even when my parents are getting older, and I want to have it. I want to preserve it. I think it's a lot of what we are is our ancestors, right? This is how our gods began, by preserving knowledge from our ancestors. This is at least my belief system. And part of what I'm sort of looking into doing is, now I can actually record my grandmother's hug and have it forever, right? And I think that's very impactful and very a way that technology can actually help us connect and feel the safety of attachment. Because my parents are not, they're all around the world, my brother's somewhere else. But if I can have a representation of his physical being that he created out of his agency, I think that's my way of trying to foster these type of deeper connections.
To me, it sounds like someone out there needs to build a robot that just gives hugs. So think about that one for a bit.
We got 6 of them on this stage.
I can't, I know I'm the moderator, but I can't resist chiming in here because this is where a lot of my life is focused right now. And I actually, this is a huge passion area for me. And I have a technology called the Group Flow Project, which I think points to a design space that I'm really excited about that I call unbiased feedback. And the idea is we can take up to 24 people and measure what's happening in their heart and in their breath, and we can turn that into sound and light and music. We've run about 2 months worth of retreat time at Esalen, and we always have the experience led by a human facilitator from different traditions, from Zen to Tantra to electronic music to poets. And we give people the opportunity, using technology, to, for example, sit and hold each other's beating hearts as lights in their hands and hear each other's hearts through headphones as they gaze into each other's eyes and have a deeply human experience, or to experience each other's breath or synchronize their breath as a room, or sit in a circle and share your beating heart with a group of people that are being guided in a loving kindness practice as you share about a time where your heart was broken. And there's no charts, there's no graphs, there's no goal that the technology is trying to get people to. It's just about using the technology to help us connect to our embodied experience and other people's embodied experience in a non-judgmental way. And I think that we can get closer and closer to doing that also with technology, connecting us to what it means to be human. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, if I may comment on that.
Thank you.
I think what you're describing here is a big difference between mediating relationships through technology, like technology mediating a relationship rather than technology replacing a relationship, right? And that really gets to the point of what one lady was commenting on. And for me, when I look at all of those machines in supermarkets that are being automated by the customers, the Uber drivers that are training the AI for autonomous cars, I think there is a point, there are parts in life where I suspect we may want to be anti-technology. For example, I came across a company that's developing a chatbot for people who are dying because there are not enough nurses in that hospice. So there's certain things that we really simply don't want to happen. And if technology may replace something, that may not be the solution for the problem that we're actually facing there. So I think that differentiation is quite key to be aware of.
Thank you, Mendel.